Good evening. Welcome to Stories in the Night, a series where we take a look at the paranormal and see if science can come up with an answer. Throughout the series, we hear from the experts and from ordinary people who believe they've experienced things which defy belief. UFOs are the subject tonight. Do little green men really exist? And if they do, are they aliens from this physical universe, or could they be from another dimension? Tim Good has travelled the world interviewing hundreds of people who claim to have seen UFOs and aliens. He's convinced they exist, and what's more, he's certain mankind has already captured dead aliens and their spacecraft. Hilary Evens has spent 20 years putting UFO sightings to the test and believes that, in principle, he can give a possible explanation for any case you can come up with. Linda Jones believes she has met aliens. One evening, whilst out walking with her young son and daughter, they saw a bright light that came towards them and hovered just above the ground. Then followed an amazing experience when time seemed to stand still. Now, Linda, exactly what did you see that evening?
I saw a light that came over us. I thought it was an aircraft on fire. We ran up 2 embankments, my daughter, my son and myself, where we stood at the top of the embankment to see 30 yards away from us this unusual object. I did not know what it was at the time.
How big was it?
The object was around 60 feet wide, and it was hovering 2 foot off the ground, and there was no noise at all.
So what did you think it was at that stage?
I really didn't know. I didn't know what it was at all.
Did it have a particular shape?
Yes, it had a rather unusual shape. It was shaped rather like a boat. It didn't land, just hovered. It was a girder-like structure, and it had a magnesium light on the top, which seemed to be apart from the structure. Didn't seem attached. There were no doors, no windows, anything. I just couldn't make it out. We just stood there and stared at it.
Now, were you frightened by this?
Well, actually, we were just froze to the spot. It was rather like when you have a bad dream, you know, and you sort of can't run. You want to run away from something and you can't. And that is exactly how we felt. I felt myself drawn towards it. I was walking towards it. It was curiosity on my part. And my daughter said, "Please come away from it, Mum." She did sense danger. I didn't.
Now, did you think it could be a UFO at the time, or...?
No, I didn't. Because I just wasn't into UFOs. I didn't know anything about UFOs.
So you'd seen it, you were scared. What happened then exactly?
My conscious memory of the event was that we saw the thing, we stood there, it went away before our eyes without us actually seeing it. I don't remember the thing going away. Then we ran away. We ran down the embankments and on our way home. That was my conscious memory of the event.
Suddenly it was there, you were looking at it.
Yes.
And then the next thing you remember is that you're running away from it.
That's correct, yes.
So what happened when you got home at that stage?
Well, we hadn't quite got home at that stage when I saw this object behind an aircraft to the left of me, going into Manchester Airport. There is a lot of air traffic.
You're sure that there wasn't an airplane? It was...
The first one was an aeroplane, because there is a lot of air traffic going overhead. It was following directly on its tail into the airport.
Now, when you got back home, what did you do? Tell your husband about it?
Yes, I told my husband about it. My son described it in his own words. He was 4-year-old, and he said, "Daddy, take me back to see the crashed boat." That was his description. Take me back to see the crashed boat. Got hold of his father's hand, and his father said, "No, hey, you know what's wrong here?" And he said, "Linda, what's wrong with your eyes?" My eyes were all burnt and scaly, like I'd been in the sun.
Could you feel that there was something wrong with your eyes? Or...
No. The funny thing was, I felt so elated about the whole thing at the time when I came home. My daughter didn't. She was absolutely terrified. There's sort of mixed feelings, really, about the whole thing.
Now, how did you know at that time that there was something wrong, that there wasn't you couldn't remember everything?
Well, I didn't really think about that. I just told my husband. I didn't look at the time. I didn't have a watch on or anything else. My husband was home. He was a shift worker, and he was on the 2:10 shift at the time, and he was home. And I said, "What are you doing home?" Because I'd gone out that evening at 7:30, and we'd seen a friend to their destination, and which only takes, the walk that we usually take, only takes 20 minutes or less if you're walking fast. But we were gone a number of hours.
So somehow you've lost an hour
There
at
was
least.
an hour missing of my time.
Like, you
yes.
couldn't remember what happened in that hour
I
until
don't
later when you
know.
were hypnotised, is that right?
That's right. I don't remember consciously what happened.
And
in
what
that
happened
hour.
under hypnosis? What did you talk
I have
about?
only seen videotapes of the hypnosis. I don't remember what happened under hypnosis. I have seen some videotapes of the hypnosis. I was regressed. Apparently saw a man as I came down the bank. I then had a floating sensation. I was on board, and I was undergoing some medical examination.
Now, you're on board. What did aliens, if they were there, what did they look like?
They were around 6'6" tall, yellowy skin, dark suited.
What about this examination? What apparently
Well, I just
did you
had
remember?
feelings of having ice put on my legs, and every time I tried to see something, and I'm talking about what I've seen on videotapes, I had lights shone in my eyes.
Now, was there any pain attached to all this?
No.
But during the regression, did you come up with feelings of pain? Or?
There were feelings of pain shown on the videotape of the regression, but I didn't have any feelings of pain when I came out of the regression.
Tim, now, there's an account from Linda. Have you any questions at all for her?
Yes, you had some physical symptoms following this
Yes,
extraordinary
I did,
experience, Linda.
Mm.
You said you had trouble with your eyes.
Yes.
Your skin, was it just your
Yes.
face? Were there any
My
other...
face was burned. I developed a lump on my neck, which is very unusual. Every time I go in hospital to have a thyroidectomy, it disappears.
Yeah.
That's happened on 2 occasions.
Is there anything else unusual which has happened to you physically since then?
There are a few gynecological things, yes, yes.
And what is the main problem there?
Well, the main problem there was that I did seek medical advice about that, and I was told by a gynecologist that all my eggs had gone, disappeared. I didn't relate the story to him, you know, he didn't know anything about it.
But you'd never
that is
had
what
an
he
illness
told
or
me.
anything which could have explained that?
No, no, not at all.
Tim, any other questions there, or do you feel you can make a diagnosis of what was going on?
I certainly can't make a diagnosis of what was going on, I'm afraid. It's certainly typical of many of the more bizarre encounters that have been reported now by hundreds of people, and I don't pretend to know the answer to it, I'm afraid. What I am satisfied with is Linda's honesty, at any rate.
So do you
And she
think,
had 2 witnesses with her, which always helps, of course.
do you think it's possible, though, that what appeared to her was an entity, a being, rather than her imagining it?
I think it is possible, yes. Certainly there have been some very strange encounters like this where people have reported seeing aliens, extraterrestrials, if you like. So this is entirely consistent with such reports.
Hilary, do you have any questions here for Linda?
Well, one thing does occur to me. Was this a one-off event in your life? Had you had anything before or subsequently to that?
No, nothing at all before it.
And nothing afterwards either? And this was just something that happened once and never again?
That happened for the first time in 1979.
Hmm.
There have been other occasions, not as dramatic as that event and not as bizarre.
But you felt that you were meeting the same entities?
Oh, I didn't meet the same entities, no.
What
no.
were these other strange happenings?
The other strange happenings? Well, I used to, when I was working, I had a badge made out of, you know, rather like these supermarket girls have, made out of Dymo tape, and where the name was punched in. I came home one day, took my coat off, and my husband said, "Where's your name off your badge?" I said, "I don't know." On 3 other occasions, the name actually disappeared in front of other people while they were looking at me, and the badge was red hot. It actually melted.
In front of people's very eyes,
Yes,
it disappeared.
yes.
Well, Hilary, what do you think was going on, either in that or in the case where she met, or believes she met, someone or something?
Yes. Well, obviously, I couldn't possibly give you a personal account of what was going on without asking her very many more questions than that. I can only speak in very general terms. But one thing I would like to say, first of all, is that I don't doubt for one moment the sincerity of the witness, nor do I question that something very important happened. But what I do think we should all consider is the possibility that something else was happening than what appeared to be happening.
So you'd say then that she didn't or couldn't have met alien beings?
I think it very unlikely. I think the probabilities are all against it. I think there's a better alternative explanation, yes.
Well, I'll drag that out of you later if I can.
Okay.
But Tim, I'm intrigued. What convinces you of the possibility that there are alien beings out there?
Well, there have now been probably millions of reports. And what convinces me particularly is the fact that thousands of them have been made by highly qualified observers whose jobs it is to know, what's in the sky, like airline pilots, military pilots, and so forth. And there have now been, according to Dr. Richard Haynes of NASA, over 3,000 reports of UFO sightings made by military and airline pilots. And I've interviewed a good many pilots, and I'm convinced that they're telling the truth. And many of them risk not just their reputations, but also their jobs sometimes in reporting these things.
What sort of things are they coming up with? Just sightings or abductions or what?
Well, to give you an example, a few months ago I interviewed an American, a former bomber pilot, United States Air Force, who in 1955 actually chased a UFO at almost ground level. He flew down to 200 feet. His entire crew saw the object. It was saucer-shaped. It was large, and there was a shadow beneath it, and they chased it for miles across Alabama. And there was a strange vortex from each end of the craft, clearly visible, throwing up dust from the soil beneath.
So if there are all these reports of alien spaceships, why don't the public hear about them more often? Why don't we know about it?
Well, we do, I think. After all, there have now been many, many books on the subject, and the newspapers occasionally cover the subject. Unfortunately, it's too often left to the tabloids to deal with the subject.
So you're convinced people have actually seen UFOs. How about alien beings?
There have been, I would say, hundreds of reports of encounters, and we have hundreds of reports similar to Linda's where people claim to have had some sort of extraordinary experience.
Has man ever
Linda
captured
actually
them?
herself is not claiming, but this is because this is what's come out under hypnotic
That's
regression.
true, Tim. That's very true.
But it would appear as if people have actually had some extraordinary experiences.
But have they ever been captured, for example? Are bodies of aliens in some morgue?
Many witnesses have come forward saying that they've actually seen UFOs which have been recovered by the United States government, for example, at a number of bases. The most recent witness is a physicist who was formerly employed at a top-secret Air Force base in the United States, who claims that he was actually working on some of these recovered craft.
And there are bodies as well, or...?
Apparently, yes. There have been many descriptions of alien bodies stored at a number of bases throughout the States.
So in America, anywhere else, or...?
Oh, there have been stories from other countries as well, but the best documented ones come from the United States. And we have people like Dr. Robert Sarbacker, who worked for the United States government's Research and Development Board, who in 1983 confirmed that the United States authorities had actually retrieved alien artifacts as well as bodies.
Where do you think they come from, then?
I've been studying this subject for now well over 30 years, and I haven't the faintest idea. I'm sorry, I haven't the faintest idea where they come from. I am satisfied, however, that there's more than one type of UFO. Moreover, that there are different categories of phenomena. So we're not just dealing with something simplistic like little green men coming from another planet in a nuts and bolts spacecraft. Some of them could well be. In fact, I'm convinced that some of them are perfectly solid. Others behave in a manner which suggests that either they come from another dimension altogether, which occasionally interacts with our own, or that they are perfectly solid but are able to manipulate time, space, matter, and people's minds.
So why are they coming then? What do they want with us on this planet, do you think?
I haven't the faintest idea again, I'm sorry. But I mean, one theory is that if these abductions are true, there is a genetic interest, because many people have reported probes that ova have been taken, even sperm on occasions. I know this is outrageous stuff, but that is the fact of the matter, that people have reported that that is what has happened.
So you think they could actually be breeding for some
Well,
purpose, human beings?
Bud Hopkins, who's an American researcher, has done a great deal of research in this area, feels that there's a possibility that the aliens are creating a hybrid. That's his theory. I don't know if it's true.
Hilary, now, what do you make of all that? There's evidence, it's convinced Tim.
Well, no, it's not really evidence that Tim has offered us. He's offered us testimony. He's offered us what people have said they saw and what they've said they've seen. There's virtually no tangible evidence that we can actually point to and photograph.
But there are thousands of testimonies.
Yes, thousands of testimonies, but so long as we have to rely on what witnesses say they saw or experienced, there's always going to be an element of doubt.
So what could they be when that pilot was chasing an object across the sky?
I don't doubt that there are objects in the sky which are not identified, but when we have an opportunity to examine them, they usually turn out to be capable of some kind of natural explanation. We've had a very good example this very summer, last summer, in which we had the cornfields, the circles in the cornfields, when the apparent mystery is, I think, capable of a perfectly natural explanation. And it does seem as if the very force which creates these circles is also capable of creating a luminous plasma up in the sky, which could easily be mistaken for a UFO.
So how do you work that out then, that there is a natural force, you're saying,
Yes.
which, like a wind, can create these perfect circles, and yet creates a plasma?
Yes, the very same force also generates a plasma. The physics of it is far too complicated for me to even understand, let alone try to tell you about. But the meteorologists are working on it. They've got good, solid scientific hypotheses for it. And it would seem as if there are generated, in these circumstances, objects, genuine, unidentified flying objects, which are capable of being mistaken for UFOs.
Tim, can you accept that that is an explanation for objects out there?
Not altogether, no. And going back to the mystery circles, it's peculiar if this is a meteorological phenomenon that it restricts itself mostly to Wessex, because most of the circles in Great Britain have been reported in Hampshire and Wiltshire, and I've yet to see a satisfactory meteorological explanation for that. So
Hilary,
far.
what's special about Wessex?
Well, no, I mean, there's a great deal we don't understand about this particular thing. The research is only at its early stages. We know there's a mystery, but we also know that there are good grounds for believing that there is a natural explanation. And that's really as far as we ought to take it at this stage. I mean, let us accept the fact that there is a possibility of an alternative. And if we may get back to Linda's case, I would like to say there again, I think there is an alternative.
And what is that?
And the alternative, in my belief, is a psychological one. Now, this is not meant to be in any way an attack on Linda's sincerity or integrity. I believe that she had something very important happen to her, but I believe that it could be interpreted as a psychological experience which took place inside her and which she projected outside.
Linda, do you think that's possible? Because
No, I don't.
your daughter
You
seemed to
can't
experience the same
generalise.
thing.
No, you just can't generalise with every UFO witness like that. It isn't possible. What I had was a physical sighting. There was 3 of us, nuts and bolts sighting. I know things have happened after the fact, after the sighting, but I did not have any problems at that particular time. No problems at all. But everyone has problems. They don't have to see a UFO to have problems.
Hilary,
So
do you
there is
think
no
when-
psychological disturbance. I have had doctors, psychiatrists, before they have done any experiments on me at all. They have had to make sure that I have been 100% sane.
Is that what you're suggesting, though, that you have to have a problem to have this
Not
experience?
necessarily a problem. It could be some situation which needs to be worked out. It could be, for instance, I mean, it's one of the interesting things that so many of these experiences happen to teenagers who are always very vulnerable people. And I think that many cases can be explained in the search by a teenager for someone she can relate to. I met a girl in France, for instance, who had met, as she told me, the Virgin Mary on 30 or 40 occasions. I met a girl in Dagenham who claimed to have met an extraterrestrial person who came up to her bedroom. In both these cases, I think it most likely that what was happening was that these people needed somebody that they could confide in, and they, as it were, created this helpful, kindly being to help guide them through their situation.
So it's imagination. People are creating images, beings,
Yes.
for some reason. Tim, can you go along with that?
Up to a point, yes, of course. But I think it's worth mentioning that Dr. Elizabeth Slater, an American psychologist, conducted psychological tests on 9 abductees, people claiming to have been abducted. And she found them extremely intelligent, and she was absolutely convinced, since she did the tests without knowing that they had made these claims. And she was convinced and concluded that those people, whatever they had experienced, it wasn't psychological in origin.
How do you respond to that, Henry?
I don't accept it at all. I think that many American psychologists, to judge by their writings, show a very limited knowledge of what can happen to human beings. They don't take into account the manifold varieties of alternate states of consciousness in which people, under all kinds of circumstances, for instance, driving alone at night is one of the classic ones, when you're on a dark road with no sensory stimuli to sort of keep you alert, you start to imagine things. Now, this is not a kind of purely a fantasy. It is a very positive creation. It is something that is being worked at by your subconscious mind.
Tim, if there are aliens, then are they dangerous? Should we be worried by them?
I have a feeling that some of them could present a threat.
What
to
sort of threat?
life on Earth.
Takeover or what?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as that, but certainly there's evidence that a lot of people have been affected by their encounters, affected psychologically, affected physically. There's some really quite alarming stories of people being affected at a distance. And
Have there been cases of mutilations attacking humans or animals or anything like that?
well, now that you mention it, there have been now thousands of cases in the United States where cattle have been mutilated in bizarre circumstances. Blood is evacuated from the body, and in most cases there's not a trace of blood around the animal. There are surgically precise incisions, vital organs have been taken, and farmers are mystified. There is no, there may be an alternative explanation, but we haven't found it yet. And
Hilary,
certainly UFOs have been seen in proximity to these
briefly,
mutilations.
should we be worried if we see or think we see aliens? Is there anything to be worried about?
No, I don't think so. No.
Even for our own state of mind?
No, I don't even think that. I think these are very positive experiences. I think we should be grateful for them and try to understand them.
Briefly, Linda, are you still convinced what you saw was real, that you may have met aliens?
I'm 100% convinced, and as bizarre as it may seem, seeing is believing.
So as far as you're concerned, then, basically, you met aliens. You think she met them in her mind.
Yes.
Well, I'm afraid that's where we have to end it, unfortunately, because we've run out of time. Well, I hope the debate has given you a bit to think about when it comes to the question of aliens and UFOs. Unfortunately, though, we can't help with individual cases, but if you think you've got a problem and perhaps need help, we suggest you see someone like your doctor or your local church. From Stories in the Night, good night.